And if you can tell me a little bit about what you think those definitions of beauty are, and if you could speak to how you felt growing up, if those definitions have changed at all.
I grew up in an immigrant Muslim family, probably like many of you. My parents are from the former Yugoslavia, from a place called Montenegro now. And for me growing up, beauty was the blonde hair, blue-eyed Barbie doll. It was pretty much as simple as that. And I was a tom girl, tom girl, growing up, who was not quite as cool as the Mipsters on skateboards, but definitely liked to skateboard, and had far more interest in storytelling and reading and writing and in journalism than I had in fashion or how I looked. But the flip side of that sounds really empowering, but the flip side of that was I didn't like how I looked. And that I think was, I realize now most young girls don't like how they look. And I examined my body, I examined my face, I examined everything about me that didn't quite fit in or look like the kind of girls that I wanted to look like. And for me growing up, I was in a cultural Muslim home, so the issues around modesty and the traditional notion of the definition of beauty within a Muslim home or a Muslim culture what you described doesn't necessarily resonate with me. I mean, issues of modesty in my house growing up where you weren't allowed to wear a skirt more than like 3 inches above your knee, or you weren't allowed to wear the spaghetti straps, but the cutoff shirt was okay. So there, we had our own definitions of what worked, but the common same sense of beauty was still there, and I made a choice growing up that I was going to be the smart one because the beautiful one wasn't accessible to me. And so that's how I would put how I looked at myself growing up.
I struggled as a young person with my body image because I was a skinny kid. Everybody in my family was big. My aunts were 5'11", 6 foot tall. They were as wide as they were tall. And I can remember my mom telling me, she said, "Stop eating so much because you're going to look like your Aunt Ruth," so I struggled with not eating a lot. I love to eat, but I struggled with that because I didn't want to be like Aunt Ruth, because Aunt Ruth was this big and she was that tall. All of my aunts looked like that. But growing up, I thought that was normal. I was the only abnormal one. I was a skinny kid. I was self-conscious. So for me, in school, that's where I sought refuge, in reading, in mathematics, and I grew up in the 60s. I came of age in the early 60s. So back then, you were told, do not major in math because you'll never get married. Do not major in science, you will not get married. So I did all of those things. I did get married. But psychologically, what was happening, because I was a skinny kid, because I didn't think I was that pretty by the time I turned 13, I sought refuge in academics. So that's where I hid. As you say, I was a tomboy. I know how to fix my bike. I still know how to fix my bike. My dad taught me how to change a flat tire. He says you cannot drive a car unless you can fix a flat tire. So everything that I wasn't supposed to do, I did. And I went against the norms of what society said back then, because it was very strict. I grew up in a strict Baptist home. We could not wear short dresses. When the miniskirts were happening, my mom said, "You walk out of here and it is over." So I would sneak and wear mini skirts under my clothes and then get to school and change my clothes. But I still didn't feel like I was pretty because the images that I saw on TV didn't resonate with me because I didn't see myself. So by the time I got to high school, we were the rebellious group. We were the ones that said, okay, if you don't think we're pretty, we're going to make our own standards of beauty. So therefore, the afro became popular. We had our hair out to here. People were wearing their hair long. We were wearing, loose clothes. You don't look good. But that was okay because for me, I said, okay, if that's how you're going to think, then that's what I'm going to go out and do. So I pretty much went counterculture. I was really a rebellious kid. I gave my parents a really hard time. And by the time I got to college, I was crying, and I wrote them a letter and said how sorry I was for all of the stuff that I had put them through. And my mother kept those letters. But my mother kept telling me how pretty I was. And I know a lot of moms, you tell your daughters they're pretty, and it doesn't mean squat, because what we see on TV is what defines what beauty is.
Right.
I didn't look like those people. So I said, okay, then I have to define what beauty is to myself. So what's happened over the years, I'm still the same rebellious kid. My grandmother even said, she says, you're just a crazy girl. I said, okay, Grandma, I'm just gonna be crazy, but you just gotta live with it. They lived with it. I learned to get through the drama in my head. I learned to get through that noise. So getting through that noise means I learned to accept myself. So I think I'm the hottest thing going. I don't care what you think. Too bad. I'm happening. But that took time to get there. But I'm telling you, you're going to have to get through that noise in your head.
And Sabe, you think that, your mom was a big part of that, telling you that you were beautiful.
She still does.
Yes, that's good. So the only thing I want to add is that I grew up in a pretty traditional Muslim home of immigrant parents. I remember my mom, putting on a hijab, like one of my earliest memories. I was almost 4 years old. And I remember her like putting it on like slowly and thinking like, that's what's beautiful, like that's beauty. And I remember, growing up, my mom never forcing me to wear the headscarf or anything like that. In fact, she was sort of against it because she wanted me to grow up and, not rebel later. So she was very cautious about me being young and wearing a headscarf, but I really wanted to wear it. And I remember, having her telling me I was beautiful no matter what, whether I chose to wear a headscarf or not wear a headscarf, whether I wanted to wear makeup or not wear makeup. That was a very big part of kind of being confident about the way that I looked. And my dad, when I did choose to wear the headscarf, saying, you've got to do your own thing. You've got to be your own style. So when you were saying being counterculture, my dad said, whatever culture is out there, you have to know that you are your own person. You're your own unique person. And so you shouldn't look to anyone else kind of to define your style.
Exactly.
So thank you for sharing that.